Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk to folks from all over the world who are education thought leaders and innovators. We'll hear inspiring stories from educators, EdTech founders, AI experts, and others who are fearlessly innovating and delivering unique learning experiences. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Look out. I am fired up today. I read something online that just set me off. So here we go. Rant in full force. All right. So why do students have to conform to a schedule, from the school versus, being able to just learn at their own pace? So I want you to really think about this. Okay. So this is like a fundamental problem with our current, education system and the way most schools operate. So can you remember when you were in grade school? So where were you on the spectrum, right? Maybe you were one of the, the bright kids who always seemed to be ahead. Or maybe you were, mildly ADHD, or maybe you have dyslexia and were labeled as a slow learner, right? So, the problem here is that no matter where you were on that spectrum, the school had a schedule, right? They have this curriculum they have to cover, and almost all the students are kind of forced to go through this at the same pace, right? They get the same lessons, in the same time frame, and you just have to keep up, right? Even though we all seem to agree that every student is unique, and some will excel at certain lessons and subjects, and others will need more time. But the system isn't designed to give more time, right? It's not designed to accommodate that flexibility for all that uniqueness in the students. So if this is a direct limitation of the system and it's so obvious, why do we keep doing it this way? It just, I want you to tell me why. So I truly don't get it. Is it a cost thing? Is it a constraint with the availability of teachers? There's got to be some reason why we get hung up on this. And so the article that triggered this rant, it commented about how personalization in education is a challenge because it would be hard to certify. Okay, let that sink in. So what they were saying was, if somebody's trying to learn at their own pace, right, or they're doing lessons, kind of out of order, how it feels right for them, it becomes really hard to issue a diploma, right? How do you know when they've graduated? But I really got thinking about this and I went, but why is that the primary decision factor? Should we put all this constraint on the way the system works because we need to issue diplomas, right? So why is that piece of paper so important that it drives the whole schedule, right? Shouldn't learning just be something that we're doing? We do all of our lives, right? Why do we have to put a box around it and say, oh, you have to declare what level you're in, and we all move, through the system at the same pace, right? You move from year 3 to from year 3 to year 4, or you move from high school to college. These are kind of arbitrary labels, right? We put on it a piece of paper that says you've done this. And I'm just imagining, right? What if we just scrapped that whole system and said, just go through the system, meet the learning objectives at your own pace, right? Why not? So at some point, right, kids going through the system, they would just go through it, right? And at some point they'd start working, So I've been going to school, and then I get to a point where I start working. Maybe I work part-time while I'm still going to school more full-time, or maybe I work full-time and I go to school part-time, and that continues for years or for all of my life. I work and I learn, right? All the time, continuous, learning. We've been talking about this. This is not rocket science or some earth-shattering revelation. But we're still really hung up on this pacing of education. So imagine all of those currently marginalized students being able to have the time they need to just get through all of the lessons and actually really, understand, comprehend the materials. It might take them a little longer to get there, but they would get there, right? As opposed to being, uh, told to repeat a whole year of school, right? You just kind of more slowly get through it, but they get there eventually, maybe a few months behind somebody else. Um, but I also believe some of them will turn out to be, geniuses in areas they might never have gotten to even study because they wouldn't have been allowed to take advanced classes. Um, you know, Kids are late bloomers, as they say, but they would still get to bloom in a system that allows them to learn at their own pace. All right, maybe this is just crazy talk, but I think it's a conversation we really need to be having, right? We can't keep, coming up with excuses for why we can't do personalized learning, it's self-paced learning, you know. All right. Um, we need to stop treating kids as exceptions and, because they're at one end or the other of this spectrum, right, of how fast they can learn, right? We're all special. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and we should all have that opportunity to learn and become the best version of ourselves. All right. So I call this taking the shackles off because I really think that we need to kind of unleash these kids, and that when we do, they will do amazing things. That some of these kids, I think a lot of kids are held back by this pace, right? Kind of not dumb the system down, but we have to have a low enough bar to get a majority of the kids through. And I have a feeling that that bar is low enough that if you take that um, constraint off, a lot of kids are going to move much, much faster, learn much quicker, and cover a lot more ground, right? Curiosity will kick in and they'll go learn other stuff that wasn't even in the curriculum. So we all are talking a lot lately about human intelligence and how do we develop um, human intelligence. And so I'm at a moment where I'm going, maybe we should be applying some of, as educators, our human intelligence, use our critical thinking skills to solve this problem, right? We need to really question, why do we do things the way we do them when the outcome is clearly suffering, right? The measurements of education, the level of education, particularly in the US compared to other parts of the world, we're in decline. The system isn't working, right? So let's put our brains together and figure out how to do this better. I also want to point out there are some groups out there that are doing it. Well, Montessori has been doing, this kind of approach for 100 years almost. And there's new players in this like Exodexa, right? Nolan Bushnell, who was on this show with Leah Haynes to talk about their approach. There's others out there too who are looking at taking these shackles off. So, you know, if this whole thing, my rant on this, has struck a nerve with you, please do something. Get involved, right? We have to challenge the status quo here. Okay. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for letting me vent, and thanks for listening to the Education Innovators Podcast. For all those folks out there who are doing something, who are innovating in education, Thanks for doing what you're doing, because you are making a difference.